thought I knew what pain was up until that moment. I didn't realize there's a whole other spectrum of it. My relationship with that flag has gone on a maturity journey just as I have. I was starting to get in a lot of trouble. The only place for me was in the Marine Corps. It's one of the best decisions I ever made. Most heavily experienced warfighters in the American arsenal were all in this unit. They couldn't kill me, and I'm still here. My name is Clint Trial, born in Texas. Later on in my life, I became a U.S. Marine. I have 4 wonderful children and a beautiful wife, and I currently reside here in Texas. I think my childhood was pretty awesome, you know, but there was some tragedy and heartache weaved through it. Around the time I was 1 year old, I lost my mother.
Are you comfortable talking about the circumstances of your mother's death?
Sure. I never have before, and so she was murdered in San Antonio, walking out of San Antonio College. She was taking night classes, and you know, she was walking out to her car, and somebody abducted her, and that has never been resolved. It's been an unsolved mystery for my whole life, and I think this is one of the first times I've ever really talked about that outside of the people that I love most. And so my dad ended up raising us as a single father. In my eyes, you know, my dad was my absolute hero. My dad was a Vietnam vet, a Marine. I saw a lot of combat. He did, I think, close to 3 tours. You know, back then, a tour meant, you know, a full 13 months. He had, I think, 3 Purple Hearts. You know, it was award in valor. You know, if we weren't working, I was out exploring. Our property shared a border with Camp Bullis. I could hop the fence, spy out on the Army guys whenever they were having their drills. It was like a routine thing for Hueys to be flying over, and they used to pull right in our backyard and like wave because like my dad knew some of the guys on Bullis. So they would come over and hover, and it was like the coolest thing, man. Texas in the 70s, especially in the hill country, man, like it was so much different than it is now. There's a picture of me, man, when I'm like, you know, 4 or 5, and I got like grape jelly all over my face and everything, and I'm on the ground with Samson, who's our mountain lion. It was just like wrestling with him. I watched him grow to be a full-size cat, and my dad had built this massive cage in the back of in our backyard, and we lived in a single wide trailer at the time. You know, we used to take Samson on the trampoline, man, like his front claws declawed, man, and like full blown mountain lion, and he'd be there on the trampoline with us, man. You just had to make sure you never turned your back on him. And I still remember the morning Samson died. You know, my dad brought him in from outside and put him on our deep freezer. So he's laying down, and his fucking nose, man, I didn't even talk about it. His nose is bleeding and everything. To me, I think that was one of my first real true memories of like hardcore sadness, you know? And it was a fucking mountain lion, you know? You just figured like, why would I shield my boys from the world? You know, it's my job to raise them and prepare them for life. There was no place where his boys were off limits, you know, nowhere. So everything he did, we were exposed to. My dad had seen on the TV the '76 Olympics and cheering. He was like, so he came in to me and my brother. He was like, you guys want to do gymnastics? And there was a little gym in San Antonio, and he would take us there, and we ended up getting good at it. My dad being who he was, he decided, well, hey man, maybe it's time for us to move. So he uprooted us out of Texas. We get up to Michigan, and he's like, hey, you know, they got a gymnastic team. I was like, well, I'll go check it out. They had a massive gym and everything, and I was like, huh, let me just see what I can do. And one of the first things I did was hopped up on the rings. And that kind of hooked me, and I was like, yeah, I'll get on the gymnastics teams. And we competed, and I won the Michigan State Championship 2 years in a row. Around the time I was in high school, I got in trouble. I was starting to get in a lot of trouble. But, you know, from 16 to 18, I had already hit up Guatemala, Belize, Honduras, Salvador. That was kind of his playground, you know, for the 80s. So it was an environment that he was willing to bring me into and show me, give me a little taste of the world. And it certainly worked. He had a very good tie-in with the Guatemalan military. He brought me down there and put me in Guatemalan jump school. It was incredibly difficult at the time because, you know, I was still really pretty young. On one of my trips, I went through a ranger school down in Guatemala a little bit later. And that was a feed from the fire hose experience on, you know, shooting, demo, like all of it. It's amazing when I think about it now because I'm like, how in the fuck would somebody ever get away with that? My dad was just straight, trying to groom me for what he saw as being an inevitability, which, like, yeah, my son is absolutely going to be in the Marine Corps at some point. So I think it was his way of channeling all the extra static, stray voltage energy that I had and forcing me to apply it to something that I could learn and then take with me in a career in the Marines. But he had different thoughts about that. He didn't want me to join the Marine Corps. He wanted me to go to college. He was like, have you heard of Army Rangers? And I was like, yeah, I've heard of Army Rangers. Like, you could go to boot camp after your junior year down Fort Benning, Georgia. And I was like, Fort Benning, I've heard that. He's like, yeah, that's home of the infantry. I'm like, grunts? Like, yeah, there's Rangers are down there. And I'm like, next thing I know, my room went from having like all Marine Corps shit posters all over the wall to like Army Rangers. And I was like, yeah, man, I'm gonna be a Ranger. But he's like, hey, this is what you're gonna do. You join the National Guard, right? And you can get Ranger put into your contract, and then you can come back home and go to college, and you'll go and do your drill once a month, whatever, 2 weeks a year. And then you can just tell them, like, hey, you know, I want to transfer over to active duty. At this point, this is where the bullshit started coming into play. But he was just trying to, you know, put me on a course that he thought was better. And he would tell me, he's like, I don't want you to be in the Corps, man. And so I just became completely, I don't know, I romanticized it. When I got to the National Guard, I'd already gone through boot camp and airborne school, and I found out that, like, I don't actually have Ranger in my contract, and this shit ain't happening. So I go back home, and now I'm finishing out my senior year, and I start going to my drills once a month. For me, who I was at the time, it was not scratching an itch that I had, and that itch was like, I wasn't supposed to be doing that part-time. And so I was very frustrated by the fact that, like, I was going and playing soldier once a month and a couple weeks a year, and when I wanted to be doing it, that's all I wanted to be doing. So I got very frustrated by it, and you know, as a young man not having a lot of shit figured out yet, I left the National Guard in a bad way. It was beginning to become very clear to me that as a young man in my 20s, I was struggling and struggling and struggling, and nothing felt like the proper fit for me. Long enough time went by, and next thing I know, I've got a notice like, hey, guess what, shitbag, you now have a bad conduct discharge, which, I mean, that's equivalent to dishonorable discharge. I ended up having to sit through multiple boards before joining the Marines, just to convince them that, hey, a couple of years has gone by, I'm not the same guy that did that stupid thing. Please give me a chance. The only place for me was in the Marine Corps. That was where I wasn't going to be satisfied until I made myself, until they made me into a Marine. I was getting ready to walk out the door, and I got a phone call. It was my uncle. He's like, hey, your dad is, he was on the aircraft that went down in the Pacific Ocean. I left home the same day to go down to find my dad, you know, because at this point, I had not yet accepted the fact that he was on that aircraft. The next day, the officials came and they took us over to the morgue. And yeah, I walked by each and every gurney with one of the local officials down there. And they're asking me, like, please look at these remains of each of these people to try and find something that you can identify that, like, that's your dad. So I think I looked at 66 different corpses, bodies, remains in all, but there were four passengers on that aircraft that were never found, and my dad was one of them. We were able to recover his briefcase and a number of his personal items that, you know, became part of the debris field in the ocean. I went over and opened it up, and, like, inside there was still pictures of me, pictures of my brother, my sister. It was a pretty horrible experience in my life where I lost my hero, my dad. And so I was a bit lost, you know, not a bit, I was really lost. I don't care what anybody says, man. You know, just because you get old and 30, 40, and 50, man, like, it still pays to have somebody older than you that cares very deeply about you, and that chooses to mentor you. In the absence of my father, once he died, Chuck kind of took over that role as the male figure, the mentor. And he would routinely call me, and one of the calls, we had a conversation where he was like, hey man, it's shit or get off the pot time. Like, you're about to hit 26. And so, you know, at the time I kept asking him, like, maybe I should try. I was like beating around the bush, and maybe I should join the Marines. Maybe I should join the Corps. And at that conversation on the phone, he said, look, man, you need to decide now. You're not getting any younger. It's time. If you're going to do it, then do it. I sold my car, my business, my heavy equipment, my boat, my house. I sold everything and said goodbye to my little girl, which was pretty difficult, you know, because it was a conscious decision to go and make something of myself so that my little girl could have, you know, somebody to be proud of. And so I looked at going into the Marines as being a thing that would help me regain my honor, my dignity as a man. And I think I was right about that, you know, and I think it's one of the best decisions I ever made. I started out 3rd Recon, and then I went and did a deployment in Iraq while I was with 3rd Recon. Did almost a year out there, and then at the end of that deployment, they said, "Hey, well, where do you want to go?" And I was like, "It's up to me." Like, well, yeah, you did a good job here, so you got your pick. Where do you want to go?
12 o'clock.
I had heard all these stories about SOTG. SOTG is the Special Operations Training Group. That was my next place. And over at SOTG, I was an instructor. I was an RNS instructor, recon and surveillance instructor. I taught some CQB and breaching and applied explosives, a bit of urban sniper. And so I was wearing a bunch of different hats at SOTG. And SOTG was, at the time, was kind of known as like that's where scouts will come and recruit you and pick you up, and then you'll go to the big leagues. And that's what we used to call it anyway. The big leagues was like JSOC, But so I ended up going to that place, Recon, SOTG, and then that unit. And I stayed at that unit for almost 8 years, somewhere around there. And then I got picked up to go to another unit, another very unique group of people. In terms of just straight up overall badassery at the most mature warfighting level, I felt like I had arrived at the most premier place possible. So what you had is this incredible hodgepodge, this mixture of the most unique and most heavily experienced warfighters in the American arsenal were all in this unit. The events leading up to me being wounded, I was in Afghanistan near the Pakistan border, conducting operations against what we believed were both Taliban and ISIS-K. We kind of looked at it as like, okay, well, this is a nice opportunity for us to go in and kill 2 birds with 1 stone. So the first target we get to, I led. I got us to that compound. It was a dry hole. Dry hole means basically, hey, there's no enemy here. And the next target, I can't remember how far it was, maybe another click away or something like that. I remember looking through my nods and seeing like, hey, the guys are right up close on target. And I remember seeing Kurt pie something off that looked like some veg and some low ground. And it gave me this uncomfortable feeling. And I remember hopping on my push-to-talk and saying, hey, Kurt, hold what you got. And I went down to him, and I'm like, hey, everything cool? And I think it's everything's cool. I'm like, all right, cool. He's like, I'm going this way. I'm like, all right, I'll hang back. But as he started taking off and going those last 40 or 50 meters to the objective, I pulled back to where he was pieing off at, because I just had this feeling that something wasn't right. But I think what I remember seeing was like a bit of an underground kind of bunker where there was a hanging light, and I could have sworn I saw a chair. And the only way to see it was to take another step down the terrain on this pretty steep slope. And so I did that. And right as I'm pieing off and I felt like I'm seeing something that I'm about to report on, I remember thinking, yep, I got blown up again, because it was that same feeling that you get when you're in very, very close proximity to that amount of overpressure. When that overpressure hits you, to me, it feels like there's a million needles that all of a sudden are going through every square millimeter of your body. So when I got hit, I know that it must have flipped me up and, you know, flipped me around upside down. And because when I landed back down on that slope. And when I came to, the first thing I remembered feeling was this new zone, this new spectrum of pain that I never knew existed. I thought I knew what pain was up into that moment, but I didn't realize there's a whole other spectrum of it, and I'm now knee deep into it. I repeatedly kept calling out kind of the same thing, describing the objective, referring to that objective, and saying north side of the objective, suppress north side of the objective. When you're in that kind of state, it's a bit confusing, but I figured, you know, there's got to be some other guys alive, and if they are, they need to be putting rounds on that target. And at first, the intensity of my calls were, you know, amounted to not screaming, but like yelling into the mic. And I was very cognizant that each and every time I called out on the radio again, the energy it took to do that was rapidly fading. There's some phenomena, I think, that happens there on that line. You know, I call it the line between everything and nothing, you know, the line of departure. I don't think we're really meant to see what's on the other side, but over the past couple of years, I've tried to go back and like make sense of what it was that I was experiencing in that moment. And I can't still. There seemed to be something that I caught a glimpse of, a snapshot of. I was about out, and that's when I felt it. I felt the hand on my back, my kit, my carrying handle, and I just heard the words, "I got you, buddy." And I still remember the pain when he wrenched down on each tourniquet. It added to the nightmare level of pain that was going on through the whole body. And I remember this feeling of shame, like this wasn't supposed to be like this. Like I was supposed to be able to take the pain and not compromise the other guys from, you know, screaming right next to all the bad guys. And I remember feeling horrible about that, you know. We have some hero pilots in that outfit, and on the I don't know if I should say this, but there's assets available, you know, that are supposed to come and pick you up when something like that happens. But, you know, it was deemed too dangerous, too hot. But our guys that were attached to us, same unit, they had their own birds. And they were like, fuck this, we're going, I don't care what you say, we're going to get him. And they flew in, and they finally got me up to that LZ. And on that LZ is when I started kind of fading, you know, where I could tell like it's getting harder and harder to stay awake. And in those moments, you try to take stock of your life. I don't know if you try or if it just happens. The thing that kept going like a broken record was my kids. Sorry. Because powerful images that run through your mind. Yeah. So I kept seeing my boy's face and my daughter's, like they're looking at me, you know? And then I had somehow failed. I think we were in the hospital for 2 months or a month and a half. I didn't know how long I'd been there, but I knew things were bad. I took a little moment to just close my eyes and have that little conversation that we all have with ourselves, you know, in preparation of what you think you already know is going on. And, you know, opened my eyes, looked down, and just saw white bandages and no legs. It wasn't a surprise to see that, you know. I wasn't shocked. Like, I've seen that happen, you know, quite a few times. So seeing it, it was almost this immediate feeling that, like, yes, this is a challenge. This is going to be a challenge, you know, and I accept it. Being in a hospital has never been a warm, fuzzy place for me. All I wanted to do was get back out and start living again. I want to see my kids, and they all came to visit me, and both my exes came too. So I remember waking up. I opened my eyes, and the first thing I saw was like first wife, second wife, Casey, and they're all talking to each other. And I just remember closing my eyes and like, oh my God, they didn't see me. I was like, just closed my eyes, and I'm like, oh my God, what am I gonna say? They're all together. Who knows what stories they're cooking up, and like, there's gonna be all kinds of like, I was like, oh my God. Well, hey, I'm in a hospital. I'm missing both my legs. I think I can take this. So, you know, I opened my eyes back up, and it was amazing, man. For that period of time that I was in the hospital, everybody put all differences aside, and all my children they came to my bedside, and I could see, you know, a bit of fear about what had happened, and that gave me motivation as well to get out of that place and show them that, like, hey man, they couldn't kill me, and I'm still here, and I'm still here to be your dad. I was always deploying for a reason. That higher purpose, that doesn't go away. That doesn't go away, and it doesn't go away because we have history, and I chose to immerse myself in our history as Americans, and what so many countless thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of millions of Americans who came before me. I chose to immerse myself in their stories and to read about what they went through. World War II, Korea, Vietnam. Those were the wars that I grew up reading and learning from those people, you know, not just out of books, but from the people that were there. They were all instrumental figures in developing Clint, the boy, and mentoring me along my path. I was very eager to get down in the MATC, which is like the kind of the clinic where guys first get their prosthetics and get fitted and all that stuff. I was sitting in my wheelchair between some parallel bars, you know, that you help to assist you stand up, and when you're walking, it helps keep your balance. I remember standing up the first time, and just, it wasn't my 2 feet again, but they were 2 feet. Fake as they were, I didn't look at it that way. I'm like, I'm back up and I'm standing again. And I've got my wife right in front of me. I don't know if I've ever hugged somebody like that, you know? Despair can set its teeth into you. What has helped me get to this place now where I feel like I've got a steady flow in my life is my wife, Casey. She has gone through so much with me. My relationship with that flag has gone on a maturity journey just as I have, because I've always considered it, and the importance of it was, I think, was something that was given to me when I was a kid. I was taught to understand that there's a lot of sacrifice behind that flag. The whole reason it still flies to this day. When I think about that, when I hear that word, when I say that word, the red on the flag comes to mind, and I almost automatically see the American flag. And that red is why I believe it's why the Marine Corps flag is red. It took the color off of the American flag, you know, which is not historically accurate. But in my mind, this is me thinking, you know, the red on our Marine Corps flag is the red in that American flag. And that whole Marine Corps spills its blood so that those stripes stay red forever. And I love the Marine Corps at a level and a depth that is really, truly hard for me to describe. My reasons for loving the Marine Corps really, like, we'll go right back to my father, man, you know. I have been seeing that Eagle, Globe, and Anchor all of my life. It's probably one of the first symbols that I could actively recognize. Marines, like my kids, I see that in my kids. Like, even at the earliest age, they know what that thing is. Like that, you know, like Callie for the longest time was like, that's Daddy's. She thought it was just mine, you know? Same thing with the American flag. You know, my other kids are like, yeah, that's Daddy's flag, you know? They just equate it, I think, at an early age with me. Only to realize later on that it's not just mine, it's all of ours, you know?